In 2015 winter, so the crypt, first of all, the crypt, as you all know, is in the central part of the church, under the main altar. And now we know that the huge damage was done in late 17th, so Soviet period, when church officially belonged to the State Institute of Engineering. So keeping that in mind, in 2015 winter, we visited the crypt for the first time. And it was crucial in order to see the condition of the crypt and foresee any factors that could actually influence our work. Also, this inspection exposed such issues like looting, because we noticed that some skulls were actually taken out of coffins, littering. We found lots of bricks, old household appliances, old shampoo bottles, newspapers, you name it. And actually, we noticed some changing environmental conditions of the crypt, so like microclimate and fungi. And after all this, the major objectives generated by the church officials were those related to sorting out coffins and human remains, as well as removing all the rubbish from the crypt and maybe identifying remains, those belonging to the Vilniusi. So this is how the crypt looked before our research. As you can see, there was no particular order. Like all coffins were scattered around the crypt. Some of them were broken, and mummified remains were exposed. So this exposure actually could make a lot of irreversible damage to mummified remains. And as you can see, there were some even old newspapers and so on. So the second step was done by Martynas Jakulis. He collected all historical background. So two main questions we were actually asking. So who were the people buried in a crypt? And the second one was collecting all biographical information related to those individuals. So I mean like maybe general health state, diet, or even cause of death. And as historical research showed, actually those remains in question belonged to monastic community. So just a short glimpse in what was done in 2015 and 2016. So 71 coffins were removed from the crypt, and more than 76 archaeological findings were found in coffins or scattered around the crypt. In 71 coffins, we found 78 human remains. 5 of them were totally mummified, so 5 mummies. 13 remains were partially mummified, so it means we had like skeleton with some soft tissue preservation, and 60 skeletal remains. And what was shocking and most interesting, like 13 coffins had name inscriptions on them. So it means like they had names written on top of coffins. So this is actually how our research looked like in 2015. So we had coffins, we had mummies, and in 2016 we were just digging deeper. So we found some burials buried in soil. Actually, what was interesting, some remains had no coffins or whatsoever. They were just buried in soil. And this coffin, it was interesting, it was empty. No remains at all. So we had no idea what was going on with this coffin number 59. So, as I mentioned before, 13 coffins had names written on them, so we know who these remains belong to. And I just want to note, like, those two colors actually mark remains we don't know any information about, like no detailed information. So 11 individuals, we have like detailed biography of those individuals. So some examples, so you can see this one belongs to Hilarion Marcinkiewicz, Justin Chechkovsky, quite impressive. We had a mummy here, and in my opinion, the most beautiful coffin from the crypt belonging to Maximilianus Wyszynski. The most beautiful, but actually the most challenging one, because it was really hard removing it from the crypt because it was too big, but somehow we managed to save it. And of course, archaeological findings. Archaeological artifacts also supported the historical information about people buried here, because the majority of found items consisted of typical monastic attributes. So during research, 43 paramans, I don't know how it should be in English, but I think we understand each other. Okay? Nėra turbūt vertimo, paramanai. So 43 paramans were retrieved, and all of them were unique in style, because there was a great difference between the technique of their manufacture. So, for example, some of them were embroidered, some were created by applications, and of course the quality of used material, it was all different. Another religious artifact, devotional attribute of clergy, rosaries. Rosaries were found in 14 coffins, and they were varying in shape, size, and the material they were made of, so like bone or wood, and of course crosses. In total, 22 crosses were found in coffins. So those are like examples of big, massive metallic crosses. And what was kind of interesting, especially for Martinas, because 8 coffins had bricks, so like bricks serving as pillows. So we think that a brick placed under the head of the deceased can be understood as an inspiration to testify the ascetic lifestyle. So 8 coffins had bricks as pillows. And now some anthropological results. The absolute majority of remains belong to males, so like, almost 95% of remains belong to males. Also 2 females were identified, but I don't think it's quite surprising, because the higher ranking nuns after death were also expected to be buried in the church. And what was surprising to me, like particular to me, was the age of death. Here you can see the age of death of all those monks. Compared to the non-monastic cemeteries in Vilnius, the proportion of individuals between ages of 20 and 40 is lower in monastic cemeteries, but the proportion of individuals above the age of 40 is higher in monastic cemeteries. So what I mean, either it means that life expectancy was higher in this monastery, or it could mean, I was talking with Martina, so we came to this conclusion, so maybe just like, oh, we know that monks each 3 years were traveling from one monastery to another, so we think those individuals who were like really old and not able to move, maybe they just stayed in that one place, or in this case in Vilnius, and just decided to spend their last days in Vilnius Monastery. And height. So another interesting result, actually for me, interesting results showing possible prosperity and wealth of this specific community is stature, or human height. Because the development of human height can serve as indicator of welfare, so like welfare components, namely nutritional quality and health. And as you can see, in 18th century, the average height of Basilian monk reached approximately 1 meter 68 centimeters, while the average height of the same period European population was approximately 1 meter 67 centimeters. And it is worth highlighting, I think, that the biggest proportion of individuals were actually above the average. So as you can see, we have like lots of monks who were above the average. And now some pathological conditions. So here are some cases, a number of cases. So number one would be infectious diseases. So 34 individuals had some kind of infectious diseases going on. 33 of them experienced trauma, and 23 had degenerative joint disease, or just simply to say arthritis. So arthritis, I wouldn't say it's surprising, because I found that cases of arthritis in old people, and you know, like old people tend to get arthritis. And talking about infectious diseases, it's also not very surprising, because it was widespread at the time in whole Lithuania. So rural and urban communities, though people who live in cities tend to get infectious diseases more often, just because the population density leads to quicker spread of the disease and poor hygiene. But two pathological conditions I think it's worth highlighting. That would be trauma and two metabolic diseases like dish and gout. Gout would be podagra. So, food. Let's talk about food. So significant data on the Basilian diet is provided by the monastery's income and expenditure book, though only part of the food intake is reflected in the source. And as you can see, the monks' diet was relatively diverse. Their diet consisted of bread, fish, meat, eggs, oils, and alcohol. Like lots of alcohol, like wine and beer mainly. However, some monks were complaining about the quality and quantity of food, and apparently even the quality of alcohol was not satisfactory. And one monk, Krajewski, actually he said that the beer was always muddy, sour, and harmful to one's health. In the meantime, anthropological studies of the remains revealed actually some unusual eating habits of the monks, because 8 of them actually suffered from metabolic diseases like gout, podagra, and dish. Gout, as you can see, is a form of arthritis which mainly affects your big toe. So we had 4 cases of gout. So this is how it looks like on your bone, how it would look like on your bone. So this is your big toe, and you can see some destruction going on here. And gout occurs commonly in those who eat a lot of meat, drink a lot of alcohol, especially beer, and people who are overweight. The same thing is with dish. Dish is this specific pathology. Actually, it is found mainly in monastic communities. So this is how it looks like. So this would be your spine, vertebral column, and the fusion of vertebra is going on right here. It looks like a candle wax, just like fusing all vertebra together. So this is dish, and dish is found in people who are obese or who has type 2 diabetes. So what we think that the frequent manifestation of these two conditions in these individuals, in these 8 individuals, actually indicate not only the rich diet, but we think that it might show that particularly these 8 individuals were maybe higher ranking, just because of this consumption of meat and consumption of alcohol. And now trauma cases. Here you can see fractured nose of the monk. So 33 individuals suffered traumatic injuries. For me, it's a huge number, because I would think that monks would be more peaceful people, but apparently not. 15 of them were actually injured more than once, so they had multiple injuries. And even 4 monks were involved in some kind of violent encounters, because 2 of them had fractured noses and 2 had injuries with sharp instrument. And actually 2 monks did not survive, so we have 2 death cases. So what was interesting, what is going on here? So we have 2 males. Male from grave number D2, he was around 40-49 years old at the time of his death. He had multiple injuries in his chest area, so his ribs were broken. And what was interesting for me, because some of those fractures were still healing, so approximately 2 weeks prior to his death. So it means he had his ribs broken, he had his ribs fractured, then they were still healing, then again he experienced some kind of trauma that fractured his ribs again. Usually these types of fractures that he experienced are found in people who are being attacked. And in this case, individual from grave number C2, it was also male, young one, 25, 34. He had a more tragic death because the right part of his body had multiple injuries, so arm, ribs, even pelvic bone, and even cranium. So these type of injuries actually indicated a high energy trauma. And these type of injuries actually signal either fall from height, so it means he maybe fell from height on his right side of the body, or some kind of heavy object just crushed him, like the right side of his body. So sadly, none of them actually survived, so it was the cause of their death. And what we're doing right now is we're still collecting some information, what is going on. We have some, we're waiting for some results from Sweden, because we sent some samples for stable isotope analysis just to know exactly what they were eating. And we hope that in the near future we present more results, because actually this research emphasizes and maybe highlights the importance of this community in Vilnius context. So thank you very much.